Hello and welcome to Tuesday Chats. Good to be back here and to have a special guest here today with us, and that's Reverend Ruth Watt. So, hello, Ruth.
Hello, Stephen.
It's good to have you, Ruth. I mean, we'll be learning all about Ruth in a moment, but there is very much a local connection to the circuit here. Maybe we'll highlight that after maybe you tell us, Ruth, a bit about your family or where you're from and stuff like that.
Right. Well, I am from County Sligo originally. My parents moved to Sligo, and Dad started work literally 22 days before I was born. So I was just about a Sligo birth.
Okay.
Yeah. Oldest of four, three younger brothers. So,
brilliant, super. That's great, Ruth. And so your mother is and I suppose your family from years ago. But your mother is a sister of Phyllis G, so you're a cousin of the G's. So that's the connection. So you're sitting there in Sligo. Do you want to tell us anything more about your early life and maybe even your journey of faith?
Sure. Yeah. Dad was a farm manager, so I grew up on a farm. I think that is Dad being farm manager, I think, made it best of both worlds in that we got to grow up on a farm, but because we didn't own the farm, we didn't have quite as many farm duties as most farm children have. So we did have some, but it was usually just the dairy, the streaming the milk and skimming the cream off and making the butter and things like that. But we also, the farm was on the coast, so across the field from the sea. So a beautiful spot to grow up in. My parents are Christians and brought us all up as, in the Christian faith, going to church, but also shared devotions with us every evening as we went to bed. So one of my earliest memories is of Dad reading the Bible and praying with myself and David as we were getting ready to go to bed. And in fact, one of my earliest memories is praying at my father's knee, accepting that Christ had died for me, probably the age of 4 or 5, not sure exactly what age I was, but certainly I always knew that God existed. I always knew he loved me, and I don't ever remember a time where I didn't love him in return. So so many people have a conversion experience. I don't have a conversion experience, but I very much have a journey of faith as I got to know God more and understand more of what it meant to follow him and to be a disciple. So, it's always been part of who I am, has been in following God.
Powerful, brilliant. Ruth, I can't remember when I first met you, but at CEF camps in Sligo, which were run by my aunt and uncle, Joan Mabel Kennedy. I think we would have crossed paths somewhere in those years.
Most likely. Most likely, we are of an age.
I would have remembered your brothers maybe around that time. And so you went into teacher training and teaching. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in that God has been very clear in the large leadings of my life and in what to go into. When I was about 4 or 5, a neighbor asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said that I wanted to be a missionary. So that itself was always in the back of my mind. Doing an engineering degree, coming towards the end of my degree, I realized that, number one, I was training for myself for a desk job, which I didn't really like the idea of. Number two, I didn't have brilliant skills as an engineer. I was going to be coming in sort of mediocre in the class, in the middle of the class. I certainly wasn't a high flyer.
Right.
And number three, I knew that to take engineering overseas, I would need to be able to, number one, think of solutions outside the box, not just come up with a generic solution. And number two, I probably needed to be able to create those solutions. I knew I didn't have either of those skills. So not really wanting to do the job and not knowing how God could use me as an engineer in an overseas capacity, I was wondering, what will I do? And a friend of mine suggested that I should go for teaching because I had a good teacher's stare. So I'm not sure if that is the best reason for going into a career, but I had wanted to teach when I was younger. But in the Republic of Ireland, as you know, you have to be able to get an honour in Honours Irish if you want to teach primary, which is what I wanted at the time. And there wasn't a hope of me getting an honour in Honours Irish at the cert. I'm not good at languages. So that thought of teaching resonated with me. So I went to the education office and in university in Jordanstown, or not the education office, the careers guidance office, and was asking information about the PGCEs. And I will always remember the response of the lady there. She said, the information about that course is not out yet. The new PGCE about to start in Jordanstown. And because it was a new one, it was a little bit late in being organized. So instead of applications being due in January, and this was March, I was asking these questions, or around about that time, the applications were due in April. So I was in time to apply for a placement at CE. There's another few reasons why I shouldn't have been able to get into the PGCE, but I'll not go into those. So for me, going into teaching was as much a calling as my call to overseas missions and as my later call into the ordained ministry. It was very clear God was not opening doors. He was going through with a battering ram, making doors open, making space for me to go and making it clear where I went. So that's how I got into teaching. And I really did enjoy teaching.
Super, brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, I would know your caring attitude would have come across a lot more than the teacher's stare. Although taking authority from my opportunities that I've had to take transition year classes and things, I know taking authority is so crucial in the classroom. Anyway, but you briefly referenced missionary work, and I know from you gave me this so many years ago, this little picture from Tonga. Now, if anyone doesn't know where Tonga is, it is surely the most remote place imaginable from Ireland to go to. Am I right in saying that, Ruth? So why on earth did you go to the middle of the Pacific? So what led you there?
Yeah, well, the reason I ended up in Tonga wasn't anything to do with a decision I made again. When you apply to the Methodist Missionary Society as a mission partner, you are given, you're told where to go. I was in one of the interviews, I remember being asked if we were to offer you a place that didn't include teaching, would you, what would you think about that? And my response was, well, I'd have to think a lot about that, because I very much feel that God called me into teaching, and that was, I had worked as a teacher in Ireland to get experience. I had worked as a teacher in Bolivia at that stage as well to get experience as a missionary, and so I felt strongly called to that. So I was just delighted that the position was one of teaching, and one where I would be teaching through English, not having to learn another language, because again, already languages and me do not mix. And I had, so when I was told by the church I was going to Tonga, the first thing I had to do was, and because this was back in 2001, I think, I had to go to an atlas rather than the internet and look up to find out where Tonga was. But I must say, living on a small island in the South Pacific wasn't a hardship.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And any particular of your time there, what unique things, I mean, it's totally unique compared to Ireland, but what stands out the most, and maybe even the church there as well?
Yeah, well, from a school perspective, as I said, teaching was through English, but the first language in Tonga is Tongan. And our school didn't have a good reputation as far as teaching through English was concerned. We had a high failure rate.
Right.
The year I think it was the year before I arrived, out of 59 people doing the TSC, which would be sort of the equivalent of the old intercert, sort of that level, only 5 had passed.
No, okay.
And so what we found was that teachers didn't have confidence in their own English ability.
Okay.
Teaching through English, so they often taught through Tongan. The students didn't have ability in their learning. They didn't have confidence in their ability to learn through English, so they didn't often make an effort to learn through English. But all exams were in English.
Wow.
So you had teachers not confident in their teaching. Teachers were not confident in their students' learning. The students were not confident in their ability to learn. So it all came down to a very high failure rate. I love reading, and a book I was reading about a first-year teacher when I was in Tonga, she said something like this. She said, "I have no right to indulge in a lack of confidence. It would only interfere with the task before me." So if you, and this is, as you said, you need to have authority in a classroom. And if as a teacher, you go into a classroom lacking in confidence to teach, the students will run over you. We've seen it. We've all seen it. We've seen teachers who are no good because, the students can, them, and they can't get authority in their classroom. And so that really resonated with me for the teachers there. What they needed was confidence. But even more, it resonated with me as for, so often God asks us to do things and we say, "Oh no, I couldn't do that." Or, "Oh no, he would do it much better." Or she has the skills that are necessary. And we say, "Oh no, I couldn't do it." So I changed that quote for myself and for my colleagues, most of whom would be Christian. Was, "I have no right to indulge in a lack of confidence. It would only interfere with the task God has to do in and through me."
Right. Yeah.
I don't need to have confidence in myself. All I need to do is have confidence that if God has called me to do this, then he will enable me.
Yeah.
And I was using this very much for my colleagues in the school there. And God had his usual laugh and turned that around on me, because it wasn't, I think it was in the next year or two that I felt called to the ordained ministry. And I certainly never felt that this was something that I could do. And so, but because I had been sharing this quote with others, and taking it on for myself, I was like, well, if God is calling me to the ordained ministry, he will enable me, and that he will make it right for me to do this. So yeah, that was one of the big things there, was seeing how much a lack of confidence could, change people's lives.
Yeah.
We had one, let's say this, one young man, his name was Timote, and Timote was, like quite a few of our students, he repeated Form 5 a number of times to try and pass his TSC. He eventually passed it on his third try. And he was a lovely young man who we saw as teachers, he would help out with the younger boys in the school. He was very much a leader in that role. And so he was made head boy one of the years he was in Form 5. But he had no confidence in himself. He saw his younger brother and sister pass him out in school. And he felt that there was nothing of value in him for the school, for his family, or for God, because he didn't have confidence in what we could see clearly was his strong points, and points that did make him very much of use to the school and of course to God.
Yeah, powerful. And there's a lot of things there that I guess has equipped you for other pastoral settings beyond it. And those are powerful insights. Can we just move on to your calling in ministry and just anything you want to say about that journey, and then there's circuit appointments.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I was in Tonga when I felt called to the ordained ministry. For me, it was a very sudden call in becoming aware of that call to the ordained ministry. I could still point to the spot I was walking home from school one day. It was just to that side of that big puddle that we had to walk. I had to walk through to get from the house to the school, and I suddenly knew that the next thing God had for me was the ordained ministry. What confirmed it was I was the only person who was surprised. Everybody I told, oh, I believe God's calling me to the ordained ministry, said, well, yes, we've been wondering when you would realize that. So I had obviously been evidencing leadership skills and leadership in Christian roles in that. While I went to the local Tongan church, because it was all in Tongan, I didn't understand it. So I also went to an English-speaking church in the evenings. But we didn't have a minister in charge. So those of us who were willing led and preached. So that was where I started preaching, was in that congregation. And so that was the beginning of my preaching life. I'm actually a Tongan local preacher. I never did the Irish local preaching qualification. I became a local preacher in Tonga because of candidating, not because it was needed for me preaching there either. So yeah, once that happened, then I looked into the candidating. The new process was starting, which suited me better because I hadn't done the Irish local preacher course, and the exams in the old candidating process were based on the local preachers course, which I hadn't done. So the new candidating process didn't require exams, which to say suited me better. So I had to come back to Ireland for that, and worked as a year as a lay pastor in Dungannon, which is where I had taught before. So I already knew the area and knew a lot of people, which was great. Again, God's leading and guiding. I hadn't wanted to come home from Tonga for more than a year before I would start in college, but the church required it, and it was a great blessing to have that year where I had, as a lay pastor, the minister was there, and I was very thankful to the Reverend Clive Webster for his guidance in that year. And then college, my first appointment out of college was the Lisbon Maguire's Bridge and Tempo Circuit just outside of Enniskillen. So I was there for 4 years. And then I had to ask for a move. Well, actually, I had to ask for a change in the number of hours that I was working.
Well, I suppose I was going to ask you, Ruth, and I think this is in regard to your health.
Yes.
Actually, do you want to just tell, if there's anything you want to tell us about your present appointment, and then I'll come back to that, if that's all right? Yeah,
I'm in Adare in Ballingrane in County Limerick. So lovely spot to live and a lovely spot to minister. I am in a part-time appointment here. It's not a full-time appointment. But I've just coming to the end of my 5th year here. As someone said to me recently, it's not many people who go into the Methodist ministry for stability, but this is actually the longest I have been in one job now. I have the longest up to this was just 5 2/3 years in teaching in Tonga. My last year and a bit there was working in the education department. So I am now longer working in this appointment than I have been in any other previous job.
Okay, super. Well, it's good to have you in a neighbouring circuit. Yeah.
There's no other between us.
And although admittedly, I'll blame the pandemic for me never getting down to visit you in the area. But we touched on your health. Do you want to tell us about that and how that's affected?
Yeah, I have a form of chronic fatigue. The doctors will either call it chronic fatigue or post-viral symptoms. Very much know when it started because I had a virus over a long weekend back when I was teaching in Dungannon, so back in 1998. So I've had this for over 22 years now, and chronic fatigue is really what it says. I've a lack of energy. It's not necessarily tiredness. It's kind of the energy you feel after you've done a lot of exercise. When your body is weak, you're not necessarily tired, but your body is weak and limiting what you can continue to do. So that's the main symptom. I have a number of other symptoms, but the main symptom, and the one that restricts my ability to do things, is the lack of energy. So yeah, as a teacher, each year I could see my energy levels dropping a little bit. And it was one of those things, I had, I was saying, having confidence in God to take on the ordained ministry. I was working as a teacher. I'd actually gone down to just over half time as a teacher in Tonga. The previous year had been ridiculously crazy about the hours I was having to work to do all the different things that my responsibilities covered.
Right.
And so, I was there saying to God, I'm not able to do this stressful and energy requiring job that it is, and you're calling me into one that is even more stressful and requires even more energy. I'm also an introvert, so being with people tires me, and so that doesn't help when my energy levels are already limited. So I've had to, the years between teaching and coming into ministry, my energy improved a lot. My last year and a bit in Tonga as an education officer, I was working in the education department, and it was a 9-to-5 job, mostly behind the computer. I was doing some work with teacher training, but much more limited. My energy levels improved hugely, and throughout my year back in Dungannon and 3 years in college, I was not too bad. And again, college was pretty crazy. Doing a theology after engineering, there's a slight difference there. I really enjoyed it, but but once I hit circuit ministry again, my energy started to decrease. So I asked for a part-time appointment and came here. I was doing 3/4 hours for the first few years, January 2020, so just a couple of months before the COVID hit, I changed to half-time.
Right.
The idea was I would work 3 weeks, 3/4 time, and then take a week fully off.
Okay.
But COVID has meant I have no idea whether that will help or not, because I had to work through it. So, it's again, keeping saying to myself, as I say, I've had this over 22 years now. So I don't know what it's like to live anymore with full energy.
Okay.
I'm also 22 years older. There's no way, even if I was fully healed from this, I wouldn't have the same energy that I had when I was 20, 26, 28. So I don't know exactly how much it is affecting me, but I still have confidence that God knows what he's doing. And I don't yet feel called away from ordained ministry, but also looking at a situation where if things don't change and if my energy levels continue to decrease, I won't be able to stay in ordained ministry indefinitely. I'm just coming into my 10th year of ordained ministry, so it means I have my 3-month sabbatical coming up. I'm going to take it next spring. So again, it'll be seeing, will that 3-month break, I will be using that to try and get my energy levels back up. Will that be long enough, and will it help? And will it help me get patterns to sustain healthy living and exercise and all those things that do improve? Okay. So I'm while I'm very content in the ordained ministry and feel strongly yet that this is where God wants me to be, I'm not certain that he will continue to want me to be in circuit ministry for the next 15, 16 years before retirement is due for me.
Okay. Yeah. Really appreciate your reflections on that, Ruth. Do you ever feel that there's an expectation on you as a minister to be more healthy or energetic, or not even just in relation to your health, but also how you deal with things, or and I suppose also just want to acknowledge you've had the tragic loss of two of your brothers some years ago. And so is there anything else you want to reflect on in regard to the challenges we face and how you've dealt with these things?
Yes, absolutely. I believe very strongly that God has walked and continues to walk with me in life, and has sustained me in my lack of energy, and sustained me when my brothers died. David died when I was in Bolivia. Alistair died when I was in Tonga. So not only was I suffering family loss, it was happening from Tonga, literally half a world away. And it also meant when I was going back after the funerals, I was leaving my family and leaving my parents and going such a distance away. And, that was in itself, very difficult, but I always felt very much sustained in that by God. I have also often been a little annoyed, and this comes back to that question, people, I feel sometimes that people expect me to cope better with things because I was a missionary and because I am a minister. This sort of,
right.
I'm more holy than other people, so can cope. And I don't believe that I have an extra measure of holiness or an extra, blessing of God just because I was a missionary and I am a minister. I feel that, what I'm saying, if I indulge in a lack of confidence in God, no matter who I am, then I am interfering with the task He can do in and through me. And I feel too many people think, well, God isn't asking me to do it, really, because there's others who are so much better and so much more able. And the only reason I do it and can do it is because I truly believe that it is God who is doing it and not myself. I'm allowing Him to use me. And of course I fail and I don't trust in Him as often as I should. And I use my own strength, weak as it is, far too often. But the things that God is doing in and through me, I believe He can do in and through anyone and everyone. And it won't be the same things, because He doesn't call everyone to be a teacher. He doesn't call everyone to be an overseas missionary. He doesn't call everyone to be a minister. If we were all ministers, who's going to be sitting in the pews? But He does call each and every one of us to His work. And it is right for us to have confidence that if God is calling us to do something, He will enable us. He will enable us.
Powerful. Ruth, you've just, I'm not going to try and repeat anything you've said. It's been powerful. We really appreciate your honesty, your sharing your life with us, and just seeing how the God at work in all of this. So thank you very much, we'll hopefully in the coming months or whatever have a bit more interaction and people visiting and contact with each circuits as well. So thank you very much for being on Tuesday Chat, Ruth.
Not at all. Thank you. And thank you for I'm honoured to be invited. So thank you.